For me right now, studying comparative anatomy and disease and genetics is very important in epidemiology. And I like to look at the closeness of our DNA. We're about 99% similar in our DNA to chimpanzees. But as we'll see in a little while, that difference is very big. Now, on a wider scale, primates are important globally. Their role in the forest is to be seed dispersers. So we have plants with fruits or flowers co-evolving with primates in the fossil record. This is because each one needs the other. Primates eat fruit. When they eat the fruit, they eat the entire fruit. Then they walk along and they deposit the seeds in a nice pile of fertilizer. And from that, we have a new tree that can grow. This is really how the forest is able to reproduce. Without them, our forests would rapidly disappear, and what we've already seen is that deforestation has taken a great toll on our climate change already. All right, so now that we know kind of what primates are and we feel comfortable with them, we're going to go ahead and talk about some threats facing them. Tonight's presentation has three main parts. I want you to be able to understand what bushmeat hunting is and what causes it. Also, why bushmeat hunting is not being stopped. And third, I want to focus on things we can all do to make a difference. Now, there might be some pictures in tonight's presentation that are a little bit graphic or disturbing, but these are very important to the lesson. When I named this presentation Nothing to Smile About, half of it was because we were going to talk about very serious aspects. But I don't want you guys to feel depressed. This is not all doom and gloom. The last portion is going to be, hopefully, motivation for us to take a stand and help primates. So the reason I kind of started this was because bushmeat hunting is the #1 threat facing great apes. It will cause their extinction if it's not stopped. Yet most of the people and most of my students had no idea what it is. They have never heard of it before. So we're going to focus on bushmeat hunting, and then we'll also talk about some related aspects and industries, and then we'll talk about a little bit of my research. This is kind of the graphic I want you guys to keep in mind. Our overall theme is bushmeat hunting. But in order to really understand why bushmeat is so bad and why it is not being stopped, we also have to look at some other related industries, specifically deforestation, the pet trade, biomedical testing, and the entertainment industry. Now, to define bushmeat, for those of you who have not heard about it, it's basically any animal that is hunted in the forest and eaten. In Africa, they call the forest the bush, and so bushmeat is just anything that's hunted there. We will focus primarily on Africa in this presentation, but I want to make you guys aware that there's active bushmeat hunting also in Asia and in South America, and imported bushmeat in Europe and the US. Now, bushmeat is a very important part of people's diets. For many people, it's the only way for them to get protein. In some countries, though, over 1 million metric tons of bushmeat leave the forest every year, which is a huge amount. These are some common examples of bushmeat species. We have a gazelle, which is basically a tiny deer. We have a capybara, which is a very large rodent. There can be birds, reptiles, rabbits, but we're going to focus on monkeys and apes because these are the endangered species that are being hunted. As I said, hunting is a natural part of the world for many people. So I don't have a problem with people hunting because traditionally it was sustainable. People would go out, they would hunt an animal, feed their family, use all the parts, and the animal was able to replace itself. Right now, what we're seeing, especially in Africa, is that bushmeat is out of sync with the environment. What I'm going to talk about next is called life history theory. And this is really going to help us understand why the great apes are so negatively affected by this trade. Here are some common images of bushmeat. Now, it is illegal in many countries, but that doesn't stop it from being openly sold at markets. What's really bothersome about this is not the fact that those monkeys at the top look like mummies. Those are just the way they preserve it. They don't have electricity, so they smoke it and make it kind of like a jerky. But it's the fact that commonly you can see apes like gorillas, and you can see mandrills, which are endangered, end up on the bushmeat market. Now, life history is a theory that looks at how organisms allocate energy during growth and development. When we were talking about primate growth and development, we said they have long lifespans, but it also takes them a really long time to mature, and it takes them a long time to have babies. They wait many years in between. This is why primates are more susceptible than other animals, such as a capybara or a rabbit. Those animals are easily replaced in the population, but apes are not because they take such a long time to develop. Now, we're going to look at a slide next that's going to kind of illustrate this in what's called quantity versus quality strategy. And this deals with animal survival and with their reproductive strategies. Here, if we look from left to right, we notice again that the animals are becoming more intelligent and more complex. If we have a mollusk or a frog or a rabbit, they're going to have many, many offspring every year. This is because they don't have long lifespans, they live in environments that are dangerous, and many of their babies are not going to survive. So they choose quantity, have as many as possible, and then at least some will survive. When we get to the right side and we look at apes, they have the opposite strategy. Theirs is on quality. They may only have a few offspring, but those offspring are going to be healthy, they're going to survive, and they're going to be successful. This is also why primates are facing so much pressure. Now, bushmeat also has an economic aspect to it. Bushmeat hunting is out of sync with the environment because it's not just for getting people food. It's become a profit-driven business. And there are many reasons for this. Number one is human population. We currently have more than 7 billion humans on the planet, and 1 billion of them are starving. We don't have enough resources to feed people. Secondly, in many African communities, there's political or economic instability. So what happens is these people have to try to survive day to day and do whatever they can to survive and make sure their families survive. In a minute, we're going to look at the theory of supply and demand and energy return rates. But I really want to stress before we move on that it's the lack of opportunities, it's the lack of alternatives in many of these countries that is kind of forcing people to destroy their environments or hunt endangered animals. Now, a lot of times people think that I hate bushmeat hunters, that I think they're evil and they're horrible. And this is actually the opposite. Okay? I don't think that they're horrible. I think that they're in a horrible situation and they don't have any way out. I'd like to introduce you to my friend Joseph. He's here with his son Isaac. And they lived near me in Muntemi, Uganda when I did my research. And Joseph was amazing. He basically saved my life. No matter how much I planned or prepared to live in the middle of the forest in Africa, it was very difficult, and there was a lot of things I just didn't know how to do. He was there to help me. He became a very close friend of mine, and I cared deeply for him. The problem is he's a hunter and he's a logger, two things that I was trying to stop. While I was there, I was able to hire him as a field assistant, but I knew once I left he was going to return to these trades. And this is because in his area, there's no other form of employment. The only place that was employing people was a small school, and it shut down. Because of this, and because they're about 150 miles away from the nearest town with absolutely no idea of cars, he was stuck to kind of try to survive in this really dangerous environment. So he cut down trees and he hunted animals to provide food and money for his family. Now, with supply and demand, I want to show you how Joseph and other hunters use this idea. We know that supply and demand is basically the idea that if you have something that is readily available, it doesn't cost that much. It's not worth that much. But as soon as you have something that's very rare, the price escalates. This is the same thing with bushmeat species. Endangered animals are endangered. They're rare. So hunters target them because they will get them a better profit. Because hunters target them, they become more rare and then more expensive. And so the cycle goes on, usually until an animal becomes extinct. A second idea used by hunters is energy return rates. Basically, they look at their costs and benefits. If they're going to do a lot of work, they want to make sure it is worth it. When we hike through the forest, sometimes it would take us 4 hours to hike 1 mile. There's a lot of dense undergrowth, there's thorns, there's poisonous snakes, there's wild animals. It's really difficult terrain. If hunters have to go out in this terrain and then also hunt dangerous animals, they want to make sure they're going to get enough for it. The only animals that provide them enough benefit in return are large-bodied great apes. Now, this is because when an ape is killed, there's way too much meat for just one family. So the family gets enough food, and then the rest of the meat can be sold on the bushmeat market. Sadly, what's happening now is that hunters are targeting mothers. This is because females are smaller, they tend to be less dangerous, and if they have an infant, they're going to be slower and easier targets. Now, along with this, they can eat and sell the mother and also sell the infant to something like a circus, a zoo, or the pet trade. And in this way, they're doubling their profit. So for hunters like Joseph, in their very difficult situations, in order to keep their families and themselves alive, they have to involve themselves in these really destructive trades, and it's because there are no other opportunities or alternatives given to them.